Well, good morning on this lovely February 10th, 2022, and we are here for a Stitch with Me. So, welcome everybody. I am glad you're joining me today. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope that you see something that you like and will continue to come back and subscribe and tick that little bell so that you know when I put a video up or when I go live. And if you are returning, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out with me. Some of you have been with me for a long time, and I do appreciate each and every one of you for stopping by and spending some time with me and allowing me into your home to spend some time with you. So, with that, this is take two. Would you believe yesterday I recorded almost an hour long video that I really wanted to post yesterday? And just as I was finishing up, or a little bit before I was ready to finish up, I get a message on my screen that says, "Oops, something went wrong." And my video stopped recording. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just finish an end and, do an ending and then go into iMovie and put the two together. So I did that. And oh, when I went to open the near hour long recorded session, it says, this file can't be opened. It's corrupted or something or other, that there was something wrong with it, that it couldn't be used. And I'm going, oh, well, ain't that just dandy? So, needless to say, that all went by the wayside. And I said, nope, ain't gonna do this again today. So I waited. Or yesterday, I said, ain't gonna do this again today. So I waited until, well, it's almost not morning anymore, to do it, to re-record it. So that's why, or one of the reasons why, I'm a little late getting a recording up. Um, Things have been just a smidge busy, trying to get things done around the house and stitching and what have you. And I didn't quite get time last week to finish a video. So we are back with one today. Technical issues. Oh man. So this laptop, as anybody that's been with me for a while has found out, that I have had just issue after issue after issue with recording my live and my videos with this laptop. And I have just about had it. Like yesterday, so darn frustrating to, spend all the time only to find out that, golly, you got to do it all over again. So that being said, what I did last week is started checking out the Mac M1 Mini. And I did a bunch of looking at different YouTubes, looking at different reviews, looking at the cost, looking at what it would cost to trade in my laptop, doing all that stuff, looking at the reviews on YouTube and what have you. So, for the price, and it was really a price I couldn't I couldn't refuse because they were giving me, you know, to think that this laptop I bought in 2018, or maybe it was 2019. So 19, 20, 21, 20. It's going on 4 years old. So, I mean, we all know that basically you get a computer home and they're already outdated. But considering it's almost 4 years old and the price I was getting for the Mac Mini with my trade-in of the laptop was practically too good to be true, I have a Mac Mini M1 Mini arriving on Tuesday. So my hope is, because I got more RAM, I got more memory or random access memory. So instead of the usual bottom of the line 8, I upped that to 16. And I am hoping that is going to resolve a lot of my recording and live streaming issues. I mean, we all know that I've done some, that doesn't happen too often, but it did happen a couple times where I was doing a live stream and I was there 1 minute talking away, and the next minute, boom, I was gone. Or, trying to record something like yesterday, and it cuts me off, and I end up having to redo it. And I said, geez, this is just enough of this messing around. And then I was undecided when I was doing this shop. Now, this is not stitching related, but we'll get to that. I was undecided when I was doing the research to, do I buy a Mac M1 Mini now, or do I wait for the next generation, the Gen 2s, which are the Max Pro and the Mini Pro and the Mini Max. But as I was checking things out, I came to the conclusion, and whether it's a correct conclusion or I'm totally wrong, it seemed to me like when the next version comes out, the price would be substantially higher, which that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all, because when the new stuff comes out, the price is always a little bit pricier than what the old version or the previous version was. So, since I got such a good deal with my trade-in, I decided, well, let's go ahead. So that will be coming on Tuesday, and hopefully I will be a happy, happy camper, and we shall see. So that's my technical difficulties. Okay, I keep reaching around here for the next color. I have my threads off here to the side, so if I fade out a little bit, that would be why. So, time to need a new color. So, as you see, I'm probably, yeah, I'm doing something different again today. I was stitching this. This is Sir Frederick Frosty by Heaven and Earth Designs. I'm stitching it on 20 count Ada or Aida, or however you choose to say that. Um, let's see how far. 18, almost 19% finished. I'm hoping to finish this with any amount of luck by July so that I can start the other one that I have that I want to do for my son-in-law. So this one's for my daughter, and I want to do one for my son-in-law. So I hope to be able to start that somewhere in the neighborhood of July so that we can get that one done and I can have them both done and put together by Christmas. Yeah. Big challenge for myself, isn't it? So I've been stitching this cross country, and then in the video I did yesterday, I was going to convert it to stitching 10 by 10 blocks on the diagonal. Yeah. Although I like that method is appealing. What I what is driving me up a wall at this point in time, and I don't want to deal with, is this. All these park threads. See, now here's another thing that I hope my new mini is going to resolve, is the lag. There is a bit of a lag in what I'm saying, coordinating with what I'm doing. So hopefully that will also resolve itself come next week, which remains to be seen. But anyway, I'm just not loving the dealing with the park threads. Just not loving it. So what I'm going, and I can't remember if I tried exactly this technique or not before. You know, what I've tried and what I've not tried and what I've sort of tried has over the years, the last couple of years has all kind of blended together. So I don't always remember what I did do and what I didn't do. I decided at this point I was going to go back to stitching on the diagonal again. You know, because it is a really nice way to stitch. It really is. I mean, it keeps you focused. You're completing as you go, which gives you a lot of satisfaction. Um, Parking my threads, again, is getting a little annoying for me, so I'm not loving that anymore. But I do like the diagonal. So I'm going to go over here. That should be 10, I believe. Yes. I am going to go back to the diagonal. And I am going to park this one over here in the next diagonal, just because it's so close. We're so close to the bottom of where I'm going to use that. But I've been watching Natasha. And Natasha, pardon me, forgive me for forgetting what your last name is, but she is doing uh, one of the Manchetti, I think it's a Manchetti design, and she posts in the diagonal group quite frequently, and she's working on the diagonal. However, she's taking, okay, so my next empty space is right here. So she's looking at what's my next color in my row that's not stitched, and she's, I hear my kitty. She's using that color, stitching it till she runs out of thread down the column, or there is no more of that color within a reasonable distance. So, thank you, Natasha. That's what I'm going to try. So I'm going to go the whole length of the design with that at this point, and we'll see how that works, because I can still stitch on the diagonal. I can still, I don't have to put up with park threads, because I don't know, those park threads are just, I don't, they're giving me the willies. I just can't do it. Just can't do it. At least not right now. It's just not something I was enjoying. So, and then we unthread our needle. So I'm going to try this. So once again, we switch the method. So that brings up a point for all of you out there. And I hear this a lot. I hear, oh, on my next project, I'm going to try such and such a technique. Or, yeah, on my next project, I'm going to try 8 o'clock, then I'm going to stitch tent stitch. Well, tent stitch and continental stitch. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but there are those people that mix. Now, I don't know that they randomly mix it, but they may start out doing full cross and decide they want to convert it to tent stitch, and they don't have that much done. So it's one of those deals. Well, as long as you're going in the same direction as the top leg of your full cross, it's probably not going to be noticeable. And you can do, and they do that. And a lot of people, if you're right up on top of it, like we are when we're stitching, yes, you're probably going to see that, oh, some was done in a full cross, and then here we switch to a tent stitch, and yada, yada, yada. It probably will be noticeable when you're right up on it. Seriously, when we're stitching it, you kind of got your nose right up in your in your stitching. And how many times have we not noticed, um, we've not noticed, uh, yeah, what's the word I want? You look back and go, oh, that's somebody's face, or oh, that's a flower, or oh, that's a butterfly. And when you stitched it, you went, this doesn't make any sense. This makes no sense. What are all these colors? What are they? What am I putting together here? I don't quite get it. And then you walk away, you come back, you look at it at a distance, and you go, oh, yeah, "Ah, that's such and such." Well, and I think that's the same deal with when you convert. I mean, say up in here, I would have done full cross, and now I'm switching it to 10. You may not, from a distance, you might not notice the difference. Now that brings up a question that I had, and I got an email this morning it was, from a gal that, wanted to do 10 stitch on the diagonal, and Monica, I'm gonna send you another email and recommend that you watch this video and maybe check out the comments because she was asking for tips or advice on working tent or continental in a diagonal. And to be perfectly honest, I don't do tent or continental. I mean, I know how to do it, but I don't normally choose that as my stitching style. Yes, I've dabbled in it, but it's not a technique that I choose to sink my teeth into. It's just I prefer, and again, because my nose is right up in it, I prefer to stitch a full cross. No particular reason, I just prefer that look as opposed to a 10 stitch or a continental stitch. And I use the terms loosely and interchangeably. Yeah, like I said, I just prefer the look of a full cross. A 10 stitch just feels incomplete to me. No, I do not think it's cheating. A lot of people said, "Oh, 10 stitch, that's cheating. This is cross stitch." Well, you know what? That brings up a whole nother discussion that there are many stitches to cross stitch. How many times, I mean, one can say, "Oh, that's not cross stitch," but how many times are you doing a cross stitch piece that incorporates specialty other stitches in it? It's still a cross stitch piece. It's still it's still needlework. It's still stitching. X's are just one form of needlework. There's all kinds of stuff out there, all kinds. So, you know, I mean, and that's a to each your own. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying that's my opinion, that a half stitch, a 10 stitch, a continental stitch is just as much a part of all of this as an X is. But that's just my 2 cents on that. But anyway, Monica, was interested in tips on doing 10 stitch or continental stitch, and really the only because I don't normally do that, and to be perfectly honest, I don't have a lot of experience in doing that. So it was difficult for me to give her a really good answer. So if any of you have any tips or techniques, of how you do a tent stitch or a continental stitch when you're doing a heaven and earth design. If you can put them in the comments, and then I can refer her to this video and say, here's what my viewers have to say and what tips they have to offer. I did give her the links for Carolyn Mazzio's video on tent stitching, and Pam Reed has also a video on a modified tent stitch, and I gave her that link. So hopefully that helps. My biggest advice to her was, if you're going to park when you're, and here, look, I went into the next diagonal. Oh gosh, you can't tie my hands. If you're going to park, that you always park in the same corner of your stitch, because if you don't, your chances are you're going to get confused as to what color that is and which direction it needs to go. It's easier to consistently park in the same spot so that you don't have that confusion. And when you get to that stitch, if you need to back out and change how you're tackling that stitch, that's easier than getting there and going, okay, does it go this way? Does it go this way? You know, you it's in my opinion too confusing. But that was the only real advice that I knew of to give her. So if you guys can help her out, that would be wonderfully awesome. And I am positive that she would really appreciate the input. Now that, that leads into my next thought. I also had a question. I'm trying to remember how she phrased it. It was about over one stitching, and she wanted to learn more about stitching over one. Pardon me while I find my next color here. Put one away and get another one out. Oh, that's a good one. I guess that's it. Yeah, and I, again, over one, different people certainly have different techniques of stitching over one. And I have done a video in the past on doing that and showing people the different ways. Well, there's really only maybe two, to cross your X so that your thread doesn't slip behind the threads of the fabric. And I mean, it's hard. I'm working on a piece of Ada, so it's a little hard to show people, but you can get the idea. So if we look even at Ada cloth, you can see in the weave that sometimes the threads are on top. There's an on top going in that direction. Here, that same thread goes under, the next one is on top. So that when you're doing your X, I'm just gonna show you here. If I'm doing this particular stitch here, and to me it looks like the horizontal thread. Let me zoom you in a little bit here. Let me get you zoomed in a smidgens. And hopefully this will also help her. See if I can go in. Ooh, look at that. There we go. So here it looks as though the horizontal thread is on top. So when we cross that X, we're going to go down in this corner. But so that the fabric thread, or so that the thread doesn't slip underneath, what you want to do is come up in the direction that that top fabric thread goes. So if my fabric thread is horizontal, I'm going to come up here. Okay, so what that does is it locks the thread, your embroidery floss, around the thread in the fabric so that it can't slip underneath. Okay, by the same token, if it's a vertical thread, you want to come up in the bottom right corner, so that the same principle, so that your thread is locked, so to speak, in a manner where it can't slip under that fabric thread. That, if I'm stitching on, say, 25 count, that's a technique that I try to use as I stitch. Now, on Aida cloth, it really doesn't much matter which direction you go, because it can't slip under anyway, because of it's a different weave in the fabric. And that will be another upcoming video uh, in the not too distant future on different fabrics and the different weaves of the fabric. Um, but that's the biggest thing with knowing how to stitch over one. The other technique that helps to prevent that is if you look up Ruth Sparrow on the internet and you go into, she has a really informative website. And if you go into her area of showing you different techniques, what she advocates and the way she teaches stitching over one is to come up in your bottom, start on the right-hand side of your fabric, come up in the bottom of your bottom left corner of your stitch. Now, you can do this as a sewing method, or you can do it stick and stab. But basically what you do is a continental stitch. So you come up in the bottom left, you go down in the top right. You come up in the next stitch in the bottom left. Once again, you come down in the top right. And for however many of that color, you keep repeating that. Now, what do I do next? Now, you come up in the top left. I should have had a darker thread here, but I wanted to use that thread over here. You come up in the top left, go down in the bottom right, and again, you can do this as a scoop or as a stick and stab. You come up in the top of that next stitch, and you cross them on the way back. So if you're doing it as a sewing method, it's easiest if you turn your fabric 90 degrees. If you're doing it as a stick and stab, you don't need to turn. You can just, continue up in the top left, down in the bottom right. And then that again is a method that will, okay, now I get undone here. Um, will keep your embroidery floss from sliding under your fabric threads. And that's the whole gist of basically the whole bottom line of when you're stitching over one. What you want to do, I mean, yes, you want to make your pretty X's, obviously, but what is just as important in how neat your X's look is to have them not be slipping under the threads of your fabric. So those are the biggest suggestions that I had for her for stitching over one. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you need to know to do that. Um, yeah, and if you're going to over one, if let me think about this. I would think when you're stitching over one and you want to do tent or you want to do just half the stitch. And help me out here if I'm wrong, guys, because I don't stitch this way. I'm a full cross kind of gal. If you're doing tent or the half stitch where you're not going to cross and make a full X, to avoid your threads from slipping, it's probably better to do it as a continental style, like the Ruth Sparrow method, as opposed to just a half stitch. Now, the only thing with that is it's going to use more thread because you're in essence, and the purpose of that type of stitch is, it's used more often in needlepoint than it is in cross stitch. And the whole purpose of that is to provide an extra padding for that piece that's needle pointed, because I mean, a lot of times people that do needlepoint, they're making objects that are going to be probably used, well, maybe not every day, but they're going to be used. I mean, people needlepoint rugs, they needlepoint chair covers, they needlepoint pillows, and it's all items that will probably be used as opposed to a picture that's going to hang up on a wall. I mean, they do continentals. I mean, there are pictures that hang up on a wall too. I'm not saying that. I don't mean to imply that you can't do needlepoint that way. You most certainly can. But a lot of the object probably of doing that continental stitch is to pad it to extend the wear. You needlepoint a chair cover and people are going to sit on it, the horrors. But that's going to sustain some wear. So you want to use that extra thread to pad it so that it lasts a bit longer. Now, I'm trying to restrain myself here and get back into my diagonal. So, I mean, those are just my thoughts. If share your thoughts in the comments, because I really am interested in, how do other people see it? And how do other people stitch it? Is there any other advice that we can offer these two folks? I can what I share with you is just my own thoughts and my own experiences. Like I always say, I'm not a professional. I haven't really studied needlework anywhere at any point in time. Um, so what I share with you is my experiences and what I've found over the years to be the case, or what I've learned from other people over the years and have put into practice and said, "Yep, I like this. It's for me," or "Nope, I ain't doing it that way." It's which brings us to there is no right, there is no wrong. There's just however you do it. And that's I can't emphasize that enough. There is no right way and no wrong way. And I have to wonder where some of these, I don't know what do I want to call them? Some of these rules came from. How did that start? Where did it come from that it's a rule that every stitch must be crossed in the same direction? Yes, if you're putting your piece into um, a show, for example, where you're going to be judged on your abilities, on your technique, that is a requirement that, like, I have entered Woodlawn, uh, which is that great big wonderful needlework show in Alexandria, Virginia, and I've taken home several medals. I mean, I've have a first place and 2 second places there. And yes, that's the thing that they look for. They look at, do all your X's cross the same? Is your tension consistently even? Is your thread twisting or is it over twisted, or has it lost its twist? Um, have you carried your thread in the back, and have you carried it too far? There are certain criteria that they want you to meet in order to be judged competitively. And I get that because they want everybody on a fair playing ground. Where when they hand out those ribbons and they're looking at pieces, they're comparing apples to apples or oranges to oranges because the requirements for everyone are the same. So if your stitches aren't consistently even, if your X's aren't all crossed in the same direction, that immediately will disqualify you for getting a ribbon. So I understand that. That makes sense to me. But for those, and I probably will no longer enter that competition because I really have, for lack of a better way to say it, I've really proved to myself that what you do meets that standard. You've gotten a first place. You've gotten 2 second places. So your stitching, my stitching, meets that higher standard that is looked for in competitions. And I personally don't have a need to have to continually do that to prove to myself or anyone else that what you do is okay. Because for me, what I do is okay. I am happy with my stitching. I am happy the way it looks. I don't need to do something, I don't have to prove to myself or anyone else that I don't know, that I don't want to sound conceited because I'm not. But I don't need to prove to myself or anybody else that what I do is good, because to me, it's good. I've met that challenge that I set out for myself, and I don't need to go any further with it. I've satisfied that. So, but that brings me back to the point of when you're not stitching for a competition, when you're just stitching day to day for your own enjoyment, where did it ever come from that those stitches must all cross in the same direction? That you must have a perfectly neat back. That 6, 8, 9. Got to pull color here. That who said that? How did that come to be? When you look at antique samplers, and I'm sure anybody that has looked at an antique sampler, that owns an antique sampler, um, can tell you that those little girls did not always cross all their X's in the same direction. Those little girls carried their threads all over the place. We get told, okay, if you're stitching an alphabet, you can't carry that thread from one letter to the next. Why not? Why not? Where's the rule? Who says? I'm talking everyday stitching. I'm not talking competitive stitching. Who says I can't carry my thread? There are those of us, and myself included, where if I carried a thread from one letter to the next, I always try to carry at the same, well, so that if I carried my thread across at the bottom of the letter, so I went from A to B at the bottom of the letter, the bottom of the leg of A, and went to the across to B at the bottom of the beginning of the B, of the upright of the B, then I would try to carry all my stitches at the bottom of the letter, just so that if you were going to see those thread carries, they aren't going to be as, oh shoot, visually unpleasant as it would be if you carried them willy-nilly. But then, that being said, why can't you carry willy-nilly? Why can't you carry wherever it's the most convenient to get to your next place to stitch? A lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this either, are very conservative with their thread. And they look at the most convenient way to get to their next stitch that they're not going to have a lot of thread waste. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. You know, and who says your top stitch always has to cross the same way? Who says, I know I did, and I had reasons for saying it, but who says you always have to come up in a clean hole? Clean hole being a hole in your fabric that has 0 or 1 existing thread in it. And you always go down in a hole that has 2 or more threads in it. When doing your full coverage, yes, it makes your pieces look neater. It makes your stitches look neater. However, yes, I've read places like on the Scarlet Quince, for example, website, that's how they recommend it. And yes, it makes your stitching look beautiful, beautiful. But is it a hard, fast written rule that to do anything else is terribly wrong? I've never found it in writing that you can't do it any other way. If you have, let me know so I can refer to it. And I have to wonder, are these just things that came up willy-nilly over the years? Or are these things that okay, pierce your thread here, Karen. Are these the things that are recommendations because they make your stitching neater? And if that's the case, fine. Again, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But in my mind, what I feel is do you. Do what makes you happy. Do what you are comfortable with. And if you're comfortable with threads not crossing in the same direction, go for it. If that saves you more thread, go for it. There's no law. There's no law. There's no right. There's no wrong. You do you. Because guess what, folks? Unless you're stitching competitively, which I have chosen not to do anymore, just do what makes you happy. This is not something you want to stress over. Right now, life has enough stresses. Right now, we don't need any more stress in our lives. It just is not something not a place that most of us want to go in this time. There's enough stress out there. We could get into a whole nother conversation, which we're not ever going to get into, where all of that is concerned. But there's enough stress out there, and we need to oh, Chris, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say it. We need to Chris it up and do ourselves a favor and be kind to us and think of what is it that gives you the most joy and the most happiness in your life. And when it comes to stitching, do what brings you the most joy, because really, that's what it's all about. It's not all about pleasing everybody else. If you're happy with your stitching, if you've accomplished what it is that you want to accomplish, then you know what? That is what you do. People need to stop. People need to stop being so judgmental when it comes to stitching. And I think I've said that in the past. I people just need to stop it and say, "You know what? It's great. You're happy. It is fabulous. It is wonderful. I'm glad you enjoyed your journey." That's what needs to happen. People need to stop judging everybody else. You need to stop looking at somebody's piece and saying, "Oh, look, there's a mistake. Oh, look, you crossed that stitch wrong. Oh, oh." And I've been guilty of that too in the past. I stitched with a gal, oh my goodness, and this discussion, and this was, oh my goodness, years ago, and, maybe 10 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood, and it was a group of us that were stitching at a shop, and we were talking about technique and tension and all of that stuff, and she handed it to me and said, "Sometimes I wonder how I became this big authority because I'm no authority on anything." But she handed it to me and said, "Well, look at this, Karen. My tension is really good." And before I could stop myself, these words, these words just came flying out of my mouth. And I said, "Well, you know, if I could see, if I could see the tension in your of your stitching, I'm sure it probably is very good, but you have so many places where you've missed the hole, you've crossed over 2 X's, or you've crossed from the bottom of an X to the top of the row above, that it's hard for me to really tell what your tension is because of the inconsistency in the stitching of your technique." And, yeah, I offended her a little bit, and she was, "Well, should I start over?" I said, "No." I said, "You don't start over. What you do is get yourself a magnifier because that's really what you need." I think if I remember right, she was stitching over 2 on 40 count. And I said, Get yourself a magnifier so that you can see." Because her issue was not being able to see correctly, and that's why she was missing the stitches. And it ended up that I brought her a pair of drugstore readers and said, "Here, try these." But you don't start over, because what you do is you try and fix what you're doing, and then years to come, you can look at this piece and you can say, look, this is how I started out. This is what my stitching was like at this point in time. But till I finish this piece, look how it's improved. So you don't start over. Yes, words came out of my mouth before I thought, and I probably should have not said it the way I did at the time. And I can't remember exactly what my exact words were, but something to the effect of, well, if there weren't so many of these not done right stitches, I could tell what your tension is, but because of that, I can't. And I kind of bursted her bubble because she was happy with her stitching. She was very proud of her stitching. So what I did then is try and help her to fix it. But again, that comes back to the point of we need to not be so darn judgmental. And inst if somebody's asking for help, to then have it come across of, okay, this is what I see that maybe you want to think about. Can you do this a little differently? And then help that person to do it that way. Instead of coming across of, well, look at that. Look at your stitches are all over the place and you can't see nothing and it looks terrible and blah, blah, blah. Be part of helping someone fix something if they're unhappy and want to fix it. If they're not unhappy, it's like, you know, you did great. You did great. As long as you're happy with what you did great. So that's my little soapbox. Because you always know I have to get on the soapbox about something, or it wouldn't be a needlebug video, would it? Well, guys, I'm looking at over an hour here. And what did I get done? One of these times I should time oh, wow, I actually did 70 stitches during this hour. So overall, that's not too bad since I kind of stop and hang out and talk and what have you. Um, so far, so good. I didn't get the evil, oops, there is a problem with this video. So hopefully I will be able to get this uploaded within a reasonable amount of time. And you will be able to view it yet today. So we'll get that in the works. So with that, oh, my cat is just being a little stinker. He is now over on my hutch trying to eat a plant. Let's see if I can swing you around to see him. You see him? The nixie little thing. Mr. Nose. Yes, Remy, we're talking to you. Oh, gotta love him. Gotta love him. Hope I didn't make you too sick there with flipping you around. So, with that, my friends, I think we are going to call it a day. I am going to wish you all happy stitching. I am going to thank you all for allowing me into your home today and joining me for a bit of a stitch along and my ramblings. You are all wonderful. I do appreciate each and every one of you, and I thank you all so, so much for hanging out with me. So, with that, my friends, until next time, find your happy place. Enjoy your stitching. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.